Walton Goggins recalls that his favorite scene from the first episode came from playing Cooper Howard for the very first time. He describes imagining the moment in his own mind before filming, picturing himself there with his character's daughter, and how emotionally affecting that imagined scene became for him. Jonathan Nolan and Graham Wagner reflect on how demanding it was to bring the project to life across 8 hours of television, noting the need for careful judgment and trust among the creative team, given the vast amount of source material spanning 25 years of games. Nolan expresses pride in the cast and crew's collective effort to imagine what a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles would look like 2 centuries after civilization's collapse. He highlights how every department, from creature design to props and locations, had to build something from scratch, rather than rely on existing infrastructure. The showrunners explain their decision to center the story on a vault-dweller protagonist, being drawn to the idea of an innocent, morally upright character whose worldview would inevitably clash with the harsh realities of the surface world. They describe being fascinated by the eerie, controlled utopia that the Vault Tech Corporation engineered for its inhabitants. Todd Howard praises how well the writing team grasped the franchise's tone from the earliest scripts, balancing humor and gravity in a way he considers genuinely difficult. Graham Wagner adds that despite the show's grounding in decades of established lore, keeping the visual aesthetic front and center remained the priority, illustrated by Howard's approval of small details like door textures on set. Production designer Howard Cummings describes searching for a filming location that could stand in for anywhere in a devastated America, eventually settling on Elizabeth Bay, an abandoned early 20th century diamond mine on Namibia's Skeleton Coast that had been deliberately demolished decades earlier. This made it ideal for recreating a ruined cityscape. The team discusses their choice to shoot on 35mm film, valued for how flatteringly it renders the human face compared to digital formats, even though it introduces added unpredictability since results aren't visible until Daly's return. Sound recordist Todd Maitland recounts battling relentless wind and blowing sand at the remote Namibian location, calling wind sound's greatest enemy on set. The costume department describes the enormous challenge of creating the vault suits, including running out of specialized Italian fabric mid-production and having to source and dye more to match the exact shade known as Bethesda blue. Costume designer Westcott recalls the sheer scale of dressing so many cast members as one of the largest undertakings of her career. Composer and music supervisor Trigga Toven explains how songs were used ironically to underscore the false utopia of vault life, while the orchestral score was reserved to drive dramatic tension, describing the deliberate handoff between the two to shape emotional beats throughout the series. Actress Ella Purnell discusses playing a character experiencing wind, sunlight, and the ocean for the first time, describing the physical and emotional weight of portraying someone whose entire worldview shifts the moment she leaves the vault. Cummings adds that the tangible, unfakeable atmosphere of real locations helped ground those emotional beats. Visual effects supervisor Jay Worth explains the team's philosophy of keeping something physically real in every frame, describing how they dressed entire outdoor sets near a lake to represent the location of shady sands so cameras and actors could react naturally to real scale and distance. Nolan describes building one of the first LED volume stages on the East Coast, reserving its use for sets too large or impractical to construct physically, such as aerial helicopter footage of Utah later integrated with a rocking aircraft fuselage on the volume stage. Actor Aaron Moten recalls the visceral experience of being physically jolted inside a real rig synced to that footage. The director calls the show's fight choreography and stunt work a long-held dream, crediting the practical, tactile approach to power armor sequences, most of which were performed physically by the stunt team rather than through digital effects. He credits the fabrication team at Legacy Effects for engineering a wearable, performable suit meant to represent a 1,000-pound armored tank from the games. The narration turns to Walton Goggins' transformation into the ghoul, tracing the character's origins to conversations that began years before the cameras rolled, and the creative team's deliberate effort to avoid cliched zombie or burn victim aesthetics in favor of something visually distinct. Special effects makeup artist Jake Garber describes refining the ghoul prosthetic application from an initial 5-hour process down to under 2 hours, recalling how Goggins would settle into character as the makeup neared completion. Goggins reflects on how dramatically the prosthetics and mouthpieces altered his usual tools of facial and vocal storytelling. Nolan recounts Goggins' emotional first day on set in full prosthetics during peak summer heat, initially mistaking the actor's profuse sweating for tears, and praises his willingness to push through the physical discomfort. Goggins closes by describing the experience of embodying the ghoul as unexpectedly profound and strange. The show presented the crew with a number of remarkable opportunities, from creature work and power armor to vehicles and full world building. The team explained that bringing more reality in front of the camera made the experience more immersive for the audience. Jay Worth noted that working alongside Jonah, Graham, and Geneva reinforced a shared belief that every frame needed something real in it. Nolan added that visual effects always feel more convincing once the hard work of scouting and shooting in beautiful, real locations has been done. Worth recalled the challenge of filming in New York, Utah, and Namibia while making all of it look like a wasteland version of California. Nolan described how working with Jay and Andrea gave him the confidence to commit fully to a shot, even when it started as a stunt performer wearing a piece of foam rubber on his head, trusting it would ultimately become a convincing Yao Guai. The visual effects team worked closely with costume designers to build an elaborate suit for a stuntman, allowing actor Aaron Moten to fully commit to the performance. Worth emphasized the value of having something real and tactile in frame, since artists could pull actual textures from a physical puppet and apply them to the CG work, grounding the visual effects in reality rather than leaving actors to imagine a scene around a tennis ball. Ben Grossman explained that volume technology and LED stages made it possible to combine a physical movie set with a virtual world built around it, making the action easier for everyone to visualize. Aaron Moten described the experience of riding a real rig controlled by someone else's joystick on the volume stage, with actual drone footage whipping past his eyeline, calling it an amazing experience for an actor. Grossman characterized visual effects as simply one tool among many in the storytelling arsenal, noting that Fallout blends epic scope with technology while remembering that effects are just one piece of the larger story. The team praised their visual effects artists as some of the most talented in the business, adding that their daily goal was to give those artists as little unnecessary work as possible. A crew from Gravity Systems in the UK visited the set for a day and brought a working jetpack with them. Jamie Stanley explained that because the jetpack involves no ground force, it can fly as high and as freely as needed, powered by 2 engines on each arm and a larger engine on the back, producing roughly 155 kilos of combined lift and thrust. The visual effects team said their role was to build on that practical work and push it even further. Everyone involved in the project, from start to finish, described feeling deeply passionate, thrilled, and excited about the work. Walton Goggins stressed how important it was for the whole team to draw the audience fully into the visual experience. Worth reflected that the team had managed to create something with a genuine sense of specialness. Nolan closed by describing the enormous satisfaction of collaborating with a passionate group that kept growing more ambitious with every project, calling this particular show a very ambitious one. Ali Compercio explains that music and sound play a vital role in storytelling, noting how they build tension to signal that something is going wrong. She describes how Lucy hears a massacre before she sees it, and as Lucy moves toward the sound of battle, she experiences an evolving soundscape that shifts around her. An unnamed composer describes a preference for writing thematic or motivic ideas, discussing instrumentation choices with Jonah to define the musical journey for the project. The composer highlights the wide range of instrumentation used, including a fretless electric bass for the ghoul and broken percussion that rattles when struck, both chosen to reflect the post-apocalyptic, broken feel of the wasteland. The Brotherhood's musical identity is described as heroic yet dark, while Lucy's theme begins innocently on piano and strings before carrying the audience elsewhere as the show progresses. Todd Maitland notes that the production has created roughly 5 distinct worlds, and he considers the real challenge and artistry of his role to be helping bring those worlds to life through sound. Keith Rogers explains that sound is used deliberately to make viewers feel immersed in the environments they see on screen. A brief exchange of dialogue follows between characters declining an offer, after which Rogers adds that all these sonic elements combine to create a soundtrack that supports the world being depicted. A short dialogue moment, Okie Dokie, transitions into a discussion of stylistic choices, where the team describes balancing a futuristic aesthetic with a retro one to create a compelling contrast. Jonathan Nolan describes the team's fondness for using Ramin Djawadi's original score, while occasionally leaning on a well-known song for its emotional resonance with audiences already familiar with it. Trigatoven explains that songs are used to underscore the irony of certain situations, particularly early scenes set in the vault. He notes the contrast between the seemingly utopian world the characters believe they inhabit and the score, which gradually drives the underlying drama, marking the transition point between score and song. Ramin Djawadi compares his composing process to solving a puzzle, where he studies the characters and story to determine how to plant motivic and thematic elements. He believes that when music aligns with the visuals, dialogue, and on-screen performances, it enhances the moment in a way that feels especially powerful. Jonathan Nolan reflects on how a show like Fallout offers such a strangely delightful world to work within, noting its distinctive tone, oddness, and violence. He explains that he was continually entertained by the creative possibilities the scripts presented, and says his only method for approaching a project is to pick a subject that genuinely excites him. Howard Cummings recalls that Jonah Nolan pushed for a cinematic look, choosing to shoot on film and capture much of the material on real locations. He describes the challenge of transforming ordinary outdoor settings into something that felt not just post-apocalyptic, but specifically true to the visual world of Fallout. Nolan adds that the team constructed massive, elaborate sets in New York City before traveling to Namibia's Skeleton Coast and the western deserts of Utah to ground the production in tangible, real environments. Cummings marvels at Namibia's landscape, describing entire suburban neighborhoods, a main street, and unusual oversized structures that created an authentic, non-digital, post-apocalyptic backdrop he found genuinely stunning. Cinematographer Stuart Dryburgh notes that Jonathan Nolan, together with his brother Christopher, has remained committed to shooting on physical film, a choice he personally finds fantastic from a cinematographer's perspective. He explains that what draws him to film is its capacity for happy accidents, crediting the photochemical negative with an almost unique ability to preserve highlights and flatter the human face. Dryburgh describes how film often introduces subtle, unplanned elements during shooting, such as shifts in color or unexpected flares, which are not always successful, but can produce a kind of visual magic when they work. He adds that whenever Jonah collaborates with someone like Howard Cummings or his director of photography, the ideas written on the page get translated into tangible, real-world results. Nolan closes by describing a recurring feeling during production, a moment of questioning why the crew bothers hauling everyone across the globe for these shoots. He says that feeling always resolves the instant he looks out a window or steps off the bus and sees the location, realizing immediately why the effort was worthwhile. Jonathan Nolan reflects that such opportunities are rare, the chance to work at this scale with such rich, beautiful source material. Todd Howard adds that the crew's obsession with authenticity was evident, as they sweated over every small detail to keep the production faithful to the games. Ella Purnell notes that everyone involved stayed true to the games, since all of it was drawn directly from that source material. Walton Goggins observes that the Vault Dwellers' outfits, like the one worn by Ella Purnell's character, were replicated with total precision because fans already knew exactly what they should look like. He describes getting ready alongside the character Lucy, comparing the feeling to the first day of school. Costume designer Amy Westcott explains that her team had to adapt the iconic Vault suit into something wearable and durable enough for actors to fight in and stay in for long stretches, while still keeping it textural and visually interesting. Westcott describes the Brotherhood of Steel costumes as loosely based on the games but reworked with new colors and altered design elements. She recalls that the character Jonah described the intended look early on as military in feel, but with a Harley-Davidson edge. Goggins praises the work Westcott and her team put into dressing the entire Brotherhood of Steel cast, saying it helped bring the show's massive world to life. Westcott says the team created a more grounded version of the 1950s aesthetic, elevating its style while rooting it in a period that felt happy, hopeful, and optimistic, a moment defined by color. Frances Turner shares her enthusiasm for the overall aesthetic, praising the hair and wardrobe choices and noting how vintage silhouettes combined with unusual fabrics created a futuristic vibe she loved. Westcott recalls that the Ghoul's look began as a classic cowboy design, with Jonah wanting the character to appear completely at one with his surroundings. Since the Wastelands palette was dominated by browns, the team aimed to visually assimilate him into that environment. Goggins remembers when Westcott brought in a long duster coat, and the moment he put it on, they both immediately recognized it as the definitive look for the character, thanks to the movement and flow it gave. Westcott explains that the Wastelanders' clothing stayed rooted in 1950s style while also appearing salvaged, reflecting people who scrounged whatever materials they could find to make their own garments. She notes the sheer scale of the production. Countless background actors, stunts, and costumes to create made it the biggest undertaking of her career. Goggins concludes that being on set felt like truly living inside a post-apocalyptic world, with endless visual details to take in. He says he couldn't stop observing the people around him, and the overall effect left him thoroughly amazed. 25 years of games and many different people have taken their stab at it, and that is what has kept it alive. The team came from different backgrounds, with one bringing feature film and sci-fi experience, and the other bringing comedy. which made the collaboration a natural fit for Fallout. The first Fallout game was played in 1997 during university, when roommates crowded around a PC. It was a bizarre, bonkers game with high stakes, scope, adventure, and fun, and that energy helped inspire the show. The creators saw a strong opportunity in Fallout's built-in silliness and thought it would be a fun challenge to adapt that tone for television. They also wanted to show different parts of the Fallout world and build around the backstories of the Ghoul, Cooper Howard, the Brotherhood of Steel, and a naive vault dweller entering a violent wasteland. The story centers on a planned universe created by Vault Tech, a world extended centuries into the future. The show asks what the real purpose of everything is when a corporation controls every part of life and design. The showrunners built 3 major perspectives that collide inside the same world, and the result is a mix of human emotion and large-scale spectacle. The cast and creators see that balance as a testament to Geneva and Graham, who shaped the series with care and imagination. With Fallout, Jonathan Nolan emphasizes the franchise's world and iconic designs, aiming to bring that scale and those incredible settings to the screen. He says he made the show he would want to watch himself, drawing on the feeling he had while playing the game. Todd Howard says it was clear Nolan had played and loved the games, along with a strong vision for translating them to the screen. He describes Nolan as someone who takes adaptations seriously and elevates the material, which made the project feel like it was in good hands. Nolan describes the challenge of building props, finding locations, and choosing the right cast. He says part of the job is deciding what should be done with visual effects and what should be done practically, supported by an exceptionally talented crew. The collaborators describe Nolan as highly creative, contagious in his energy, and laser-focused in his vision. They also say he remains open to possibility, which helps the team visualize what he is describing because he is so specific and descriptive. Damon Weathers recalls Nolan testing a partial suit by immediately asking whether they could beat it up. When the team hesitated, Nolan pushed further by having the performer throw himself on the floor, causing parts to fly off and helping the crew learn what needed reinforcement. Howard Cummings says Nolan likes location work because of what it adds to the production. The team, therefore, chose places that were already expansive or could be made to feel expansive digitally. Jay Worth says he values Nolan's specific way of seeing the world, especially the blend of scope, epic feeling, and technology. Ben Grossman adds that Nolan does not use technology for its own sake, but only when it can stay invisible to the audience. Raman Djawadi says Nolan is able to describe story and character in great depth, which makes it easier to turn that into music. Annabelle O'Hagan adds that he is grounded, invested in every moment, and careful not to let details slip, making him an outstanding leader. Nolan closes by saying that when people you respect and enjoy working with are doing their best, it shows in the finished product. With Fallout, the team tried to build a practical version of everything, which created a major challenge for the makeup artists and effects crew. They aimed for looks that felt sunburned, irradiated, bloody, sweaty, and dirty, while still appearing fully real. Lucy appears as a genuine vault dweller, and the makeup team's goal was to preserve her innocence while placing her into a world she has never known. Her journey is framed as a test of purity, both physically and emotionally, as she faces the outside world for the first time. The Ghoul's makeup was designed to keep Walton Goggins recognizable, while also making the character feel gritty, old, and authentic. The team wanted to avoid familiar monster categories and instead create a textured, believable look that still showed his performance. Jake Garber, whom Goggins praised as one of the best special effects makeup artists in the world, helped apply the makeup. The final result came from intense collaboration, producing a version that balanced character detail, expressiveness, and realism. Lucy asks what he is, and the Ghoul answers with a knowing line, saying he is her, just waiting a little longer to see it. Walton Goggins introduces himself and explains that he plays 2 very different characters in the Prime series Fallout. The story is set 200 years after a nuclear war, where the Ghoul connects the world before the fallout to the harsh reality of the present. Goggins explains that the Ghoul is driven by someone he is living for, and by a hope that keeps him alive. In a world where survival means kill or be killed, the character has adapted to stay alive. Cooper Howard, the man beneath the Ghoul, is introduced as a Western star who is kind, gentle, and a good father. Although they may seem like 2 separate people, Cooper Howard and the Ghoul are the same person, separated by 200 years. The narration shifts to the makeup process, with Jake Garber describing the challenge of creating a look that preserves the actor's performance while capturing the Ghoul's appearance. Garber says Walton fully embodies the character, making it intense to act opposite him. The narration concludes by emphasizing that Cooper Howard once represented the best of America, while the ghoul has been shaped by everything he has witnessed, carrying pain for 200 years as a survivor. Todd Howard explains that in game development they tell teams to try to sweat every pixel, and he notes that the show applies that same obsessive care to its visuals. A narrator observes that the production team is, in effect, sweating every pixel on the show. The commentary compares the series to the games, describing the show as another installment set within the Fallout universe. It is said that for fans, the series will center on Fidelity to Fallout's established world. Speakers from Kilter and Amazon are credited with doing everything possible to ensure the show remains pure Fallout, and the narrator affirms that they have succeeded. Todd Howard remarks that everyone working on the series brings attention to detail and genuine love for the material, which contributes to its authenticity within the Fallout world. Aaron Moten lists iconic in-world elements, T-60 machines and monsters from Yao Guai to Gulpers and Ghouls, and declares the series to be a real-life version of Fallout. One interviewee describes being astonished the first time they saw things written on the page realized in the real world. Ella Purnell praises every detail as precise and well thought out, likening the production's care to that of the games. Todd Howard reflects that seeing the game's technology come to life on screen is awe-inspiring. The production team credits Legacy Effects, a legendary Hollywood shop, with building the power armor around stunt performer Adam Shippey. They explain that the suit, inspired by an in-game 1,000-pound design, was engineered so a person could actually wear, operate, and perform in it. Michael Jortner recounts that in fabricating props such as Pip-Boys, the team aimed to remain true to the game's design and aesthetic. Todd Howard notes that people have wanted a Fallout show since Fallout 3, and he describes his own long series of meetings and conversations where ideas often didn't quite click for him. Howard remembers being selective and patient until the project aligned with his vision. Graham Altman states that everything changed when Todd Howard met with Jonathan Nolan, implying that their collaboration unlocked the right approach for adaptation. Ambient radio static and a jazz soundtrack set the scene as the producers described their longtime mutual admiration and the ease of their initial conversations. They emphasized that it was clear Howard had played and loved the games, and that he brought a concrete vision for translating them to the screen. The team says they were patient, and once the right creative alignment was found, it became obvious how to bring Fallout to television. A speaker affirms that this is the right way to bring Fallout to the screen. The producers compare their approach to making a new game, telling a new story in a new location, and they say the show follows that same principle. Jonathan Nolan notes the need for incredibly talented showrunners to realize the project and describes the creative interest in peeling back layers of the franchise's absurd, characterful situations. The series is characterized as a new installation of the games, one that builds on the existing world rather than changing it. Nolan explains that working hand-in-hand with Todd and Bethesda involved extensive effort to ensure the series continues to expand the Fallout universe. Finally, the narration tells fans that if they want to know the next Fallout story, this series is the one to watch. Jonathan Nolan describes the project as a dream come true for him as a director, saying that the team is picking up the mantle of work many talented writers and artists have developed over decades. He explains that they wanted to tell an original story set within the Fallout universe. Geneva Robertson-Dworet says they were drawn to creating characters who would embody the different factions that Fallout is famous for. She lists examples: a vault dweller, a ghoul, and a member of the Brotherhood of Steel as the kinds of figures the series will include. Wagner notes their aim to show as much of the world as possible through different lenses, which he believes makes viewers lean in. A whimsical musical cue accompanies the introduction of Lucy McLean, who identifies herself as an active contributor to her community's well-being. Ella Purnell comments that Lucy is doing her duty and is helping rebuild America until an event happens that upends her world. The narration indicates chaos erupts, screams and explosions are heard. Then Lucy emerges onto the surface and experiences the world for the first time. A brief, ordinary interaction follows as Lucy asks someone for directions, but the situation quickly turns ugly. Walton Goggins describes the ghoul as someone who has seen the worst of humanity and who is as ruthless as they come. The commentary frames Fallout as exploring the chasm between the haves and the have-nots in a world where survival often means killing or being killed. Aaron Moten explains that the story finds Maximus as a recruit of the Brotherhood of Steel, and that seeing T-60 power armor represents a moment of awe for him. Speakers note that the introduction of Lucy is unexpected for Maximus, and they emphasize how different the wasteland is from life inside the vault. They observe that the show does a great job of presenting both sides of that divide, combining large-scale settings with intimate human emotions. The tone is described as reminiscent of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, mixed with Dr. Strangelove and Star Wars, blending darker emotional beats with profound humor to create Fallout's unique voice. A scene plays out where someone recognizes a vault dweller and exchanges a terse, amused greeting, followed by laughter and a blunt remark about presumed deaths. Lucy reflects that practically everyone she has met on the surface has tried to kill her, and another voice warns that she has never been on a ride like this before. The ghoul concludes by observing that while the wasteland looks like chaos, there is always somebody behind the wheel, as thrilling music underscores the statement.